Not everyone heard what they wanted from President Obama last night when he spoke to the nation about our mission in Libya, especially Dennis Kucinich, one of the leading anti-war voices in Congress. Edie has more on this now. Edie?
Yes, well, Congressman Kucinich has been a loud voice of dissent on Libya. He and a bipartisan coalition are now trying to block funding America's part in the NATO military mission there. And he's even said that the president committed an impeachable offense in attacking Libya. He joins us now live from Washington. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Good evening.
You know, Elliot was alluding to this earlier in the program, and I find it interesting as well that you've got Republicans and Democrats both in support of the efforts in Libya and in opposition to it, you know, coming together in these weird groups. Why do you think that is?
Well, in the case of the coalition that we've put together, we are speaking to the fact that the president has exceeded the constitutional authority of his office. And it's so important to understand what's happened here. It's not an academic argument. That what the president has done is to drive a stake into the heart of representative government by declaring that he has the executive privilege to wage war whenever he wants. That is not a small matter. The whole basis of our government, of representative government, is that Congress is elected by the people. The president's elected through the Electoral College. And this action that he's taken is very dangerous constitutionally.
Yeah. Specifically, the War Powers Resolution says that the president has the power in a national emergency created by an attack on the U.S., its territories, possessions, that sort of thing. But last night, the president said, no, even when America's not directly threatened. So that does seem to signify
well, the Obama doctrine goes beyond the Constitution, goes beyond the War Powers Act, goes beyond the UN mandate, goes beyond the purpose of NATO. We're in a brave new world of military action here.
Let me ask you about the NATO resolution, because, you know, last week we had heard that America's role was going to be scaled back within days, if not, you know, very soon, within a couple of weeks. Yet over the weekend, we saw, especially with the air forces that we used, a much bigger presence with the A-10s and the AC, I think it's 130s. Do you think that we are now overstepping that initial mission?
Well, look, the news today, 2,200 Marines and sailors are heading from Moorhead, North Carolina, to the off the coast of Libya, to going to an area off the coast of Libya. I mean, we have air assets there, naval assets. We have to ask ourselves, what's this all about? Why is it? Of course, we're overstepping the mission. And not only that, there's another question that comes into play. Who is NATO? NATO essentially has interposed itself above the UN, because if you read the UN resolution, and I would urge you to do so if you haven't already done it.
I have.
well, then you didn't see NATO mentioned at all. So how does NATO get in this? And you know what NATO stands for? North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, look, unless you're geographically challenged, the North Atlantic doesn't include the Gulf of Sidra, doesn't include the border of the Afghanistan-China border, but NATO's there. We've got another problem to look at here, which is NATO, which, frankly, you know, the United States pays 25% of the military costs,
so it's,
but NATO's a force unto itself.
You know, you mentioned China, and I did find it interesting because there's lots been made about this this UN resolution that was passed. Well, there wasn't anybody voting no, but there were 5 big countries that abstained from voting because they said, well, the Arab League is on board, so we won't vote no, we'll just kind of step back. And those were, you know, China, India, Germany even. And many of the reasons they gave were that they just weren't sure about this mission, whether it was clear, whether it could easily be overstepped. If we saw, and the president says this, it was such a clear-cut humanitarian issue to stop, you know, a butcher, why didn't everybody else see it that way?
Well, you're right on a couple counts here. First of all, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Germany all abstained for the reasons that you set forth. Now, when we're talking about humanitarian war, there's an oxymoron there we have to be careful of as we pursue it, because inevitably it's going to mean that this very people that we claim we're concerned about are going to get hurt. Because as NATO continues to provide air cover for the rebels, when they get into pro-Gaddafi territory, it's inevitable that there's going to be a loss of life.
And, Representative, we started seeing the Arab League start complaining about that the very first day of action. Congressman, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, Elliot.
All right, thank you, Edie. We'll be right back.